Well, tonight he's going to talk to us about Ayres rock. He's fascinated by all things Australian. He's collected material on Ayres rock, the world's largest monolith. Now, Ayres rock rises 335 meters. That's over 1,000 feet above the plains west of Alice Springs. And it's 9 kilometers or kilometers. That's 5 miles in perimeter. Ayres rock, known to the Aboriginals as Uluru, has gained worldwide fame because of its very physical size and majesty. Its dramatic photographic changes in color. Its place in Aboriginal mythology is sacred, and the rock remains a site for mysterious rituals and ceremonies. Richard will tell us some of the weird and fascinating stories that surround the rock, which recently played an important role, by the way, in the mysterious disappearance of 9-week-old baby Azaria Chamberlain. But more about that later. First of all, would you please welcome Richard Neville. There you go. We're going to discuss Ayres rock. So what attracted you to Ayres rock in the first place?
Well, I mean, I think that it was a very belated attraction. I belong to that generation of Australians that sort of thought everything outside of Australia was much more interesting. And in fact, there was a sort of a track from my suburb in Sydney basically down to Uluru docks to catch the boats overseas. And really, I'd seen everything else but it. And in fact, it was November last year that I went up to finally see the greatest monolith in the world. This, our pyramids, if you like, and was astonished by it.
Isn't that normally the case, though, with everybody? I mean, you don't really look at your own country first, do you? You
no,
look at
you
every place else.
And, that's right. Although I believe the new generation of kids are, in fact, going to travel a lot more around Australia, which is good. And if they go to the centre of Australia, they will be astonished. But it's not just the physical power of the rock. And after all, I mean, it's a desert. And then suddenly, this, it's over 1,000 feet high. And I used to think it was rather like just like a sort of bald head or a boulder coming out of the desert, and it's not. It's full of incredible caves and paintings in these caves. There are rivers flowing down it. There are waterholes on the top of it, some permanent. You can climb up it. It's an incredible feat. Some people die when they do it, but an 82-year-old woman has done it and survived, and a one-legged man. And the thing about it, though, is that I was lucky enough to meet some of the rangers and some of the Aboriginal people who were sort of told me the stories of the rock. And you see, like sort of Mecca is to the Muslims. I mean, you can't go to Mecca unless you're a Muslim. It's a very sacred place. Well, Ayres rock is rather like that to the tribal Aboriginal people of Australia. And in fact, I think a lot of them are rather upset by the invasion of the tourist industry there. And even though parts of the rock are roped off and you can't go to them, other parts we can all trample through with our photographers, cameras taking photographs. So there is a certain amount of resentment because the dream time, the legends of the rock.
Well, first of all, let's just stop for a second there. What is the dream time?
Well, first of all, let me say that really there should be sitting here a tribal Aboriginal because I feel a bit of an imposter. I'm just a curious tourist who's learnt rather too late what the dream time is, and it seems to be it's rather what perhaps the myth of the Old Testament is to Christians. It's what the Greek gods were to ancient Greeks. It's how the world was made. It's where we all came from. And for instance, when we go to Ayres rock and we might see a pothole, to an Aboriginal, that pothole is actually a place where a spear fell during a very ancient fight near the rock between two tribes. What we might just see as a furrow in the rock is actually tracks that were left by a tribe, thousands and thousands of years ago. And, of course, these tribes are all linked up to animals, and the paintings that are on the rock now are sort of symbols of the dream time is alive, it's living. It still goes on. And
are there still places that are sort of held as being, I don't know if it's the right word, as being a holy place?
Oh, absolutely. Part of the rock is inaccessible to white people. They have roped it off and you're not supposed to go there. There are caves that are sacred. There are caves that, say, women, either Aboriginal or white women, cannot enter because they're incredibly involved with the Aboriginal mythology, with their religion, with the beginning of the world, the history of the world. And see, every tribal Aboriginal person had a particular animal that they were linked up to, and they've got to kind of renew their acquaintance with this animal in various ceremonies. But to me, after having read some of the Aboriginal lore about the rock and some of the white anthropologists, the most extraordinary thing in light of recent developments is that the major legend about Ayres rock involves the creation of a malignant and evil spirit dingo. And what happened was that there was a tribe of Aboriginals called the Mulgaseed people who wanted 2 other kind of tribes to come to a ceremony, and these other tribes didn't come. And the Mulgaseed people was kind of so annoyed about this that they laid down the branch of a mulga tree, they got the sort of tooth of a marsupial rat, they got the hair from a woman and put it along the back of this object that they were putting on the ground, and they began to chant. And slowly, this mythical being actually began to assume life.
I see.
And it's a malignant, evil dog called Kapanga, which is really a spirit dingo. Now, that spirit dingo, once it was created after 2 days of chanting, as a malignant, evil being, which was, its whole intention was to kind of kill strangers. And this dingo was sent to Ayres Rock, where it actually did kill some members of the hostile tribe. And Kapanga, or called Pinya, depending on which source you read, is supposed now to still inhabit Ayres Rock as a malignant, evil spirit dingo.
But that's there. Do all Aboriginal tribes regard the dingo as being an evil spirit there?
I am not qualified to answer that.
Okay.
Even the original tribes who owned or were regarded as the traditional owners of Ayres Rock have actually moved away from it, and there are other tribes there now.
Right, well, of course, the myth of Ayres Rock and all the things have been added to now with the Azaria Chamberlain thing.
Of course, I think the current events dovetail quite macabrely in with the Aboriginal
Considering
history.
that there are so many things that aren't answered in this whole case, but that's not for you or I to say anything about it, and I do not have any opinion about it. I don't want to make it seem
I'm
that
sure
we
you have
do.
an opinion.
But I'm not, I don't mean, I can't express any opinions here one way or the other.